My friends, today I want to speak to you about something that may feel a little uncomfortable at first. It's a challenge we all face in one way or another, being too nice. Now, don't misunderstand me. Kindness is a beautiful virtue, a reflection of God's love working through us. But there's a difference, you see, between being kind and allowing ourselves to be walked over, manipulated, or drained by people and situations that do not honor the calling God has placed on our lives. God created each of us with a purpose. He didn't design us to live as people pleasers, constantly sacrificing our joy, peace, and values just to earn the approval of others. No, He calls us to stand firm in who we are, to love with wisdom, and to set healthy boundaries. So today, let's take a moment to explore how we can stop being too nice, how we can honor God by honoring the unique and powerful individuals He created us to be. Kindness and people-pleasing often appear to be the same thing on the surface, but they are fundamentally different in motivation and outcome. True kindness flows from a place of compassion, love, and understanding. It's a selfless act meant to uplift and support others without expecting anything in return. People-pleasing, on the other hand, is often rooted in insecurity, fear, or the need for validation. It's the act of doing things for others not out of genuine care but to gain their approval or avoid conflict. This distinction is vital because while kindness builds healthy and meaningful relationships, people-pleasing can lead to feelings of resentment, burnout, and a loss of identity. When we confuse kindness with people-pleasing, we risk compromising our values and personal well-being. The desire to be liked can make us agree to things that go against our better judgment or principles. It can also make us overlook behaviors in others that are disrespectful or harmful. Over time, this creates a dynamic where people may take advantage of our willingness to please, leading to an imbalance in relationships. What starts as an effort to be kind can quickly spiral into a cycle of sacrifice that leaves us feeling drained and unappreciated. One of the reasons people fall into the trap of people-pleasing is the fear of rejection. We all have an innate need to belong and be accepted, and sometimes this need can overshadow our sense of self-worth. The thought of disappointing someone or causing conflict can feel unbearable, so we go out of our way to keep others happy, even at our own expense. This behavior is often reinforced by societal expectations that label kindness as saying yes to everything and everyone. However, true kindness does not mean neglecting your own needs or suppressing your own voice. It means finding a balance between helping others and respecting yourself. Another critical factor in distinguishing between kindness and people-pleasing is understanding your motivations. When you're being kind, your actions are guided by empathy and a genuine desire to do good. There's no ulterior motive or hidden agenda. On the contrary, people-pleasing is often driven by a sense of obligation or the need to control how others perceive you. It becomes less about the act itself and more about the response you hope to receive. This can create a pattern where you feel constantly responsible for other people's happiness, which is both unrealistic and unsustainable. It's also important to recognize that kindness requires strength and boundaries, whereas people-pleasing often involves a lack of both. Being kind doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means making thoughtful decisions about when and how to help others. It means being honest even when the truth might not be what someone wants to hear. Kindness respects both your needs and the needs of others, while people-pleasing often sacrifices one for the sake of the other. When you set healthy boundaries, you are able to give from a place of abundance rather than depletion. The impact of confusing kindness with people-pleasing can be far-reaching. It can affect your relationships, your mental and emotional health, and even your sense of identity. People-pleasing can lead to feelings of frustration and resentment, especially when your efforts are not reciprocated or appreciated. It can also make you feel as though you're living for others rather than for yourself. Over time, this erodes your confidence and leaves you feeling disconnected from who you truly are. Breaking free from the cycle of people-pleasing requires self-awareness and intentional effort. It starts with acknowledging that your worth is not determined by how much you do for others or how well you can keep everyone happy. You are valuable simply because you exist, and your kindness should never come at the expense of your own well-being. By understanding the difference between kindness and people-pleasing, you can begin to make choices that align with your values and support your personal growth. Setting clear and firm boundaries in your relationships is one of the most empowering actions you can take to protect your emotional, mental, and even physical well-being. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define what you will and will not tolerate, how you expect to be treated, and how much of yourself you are willing to give to others. They are essential for maintaining healthy and respectful relationships, as well as for preserving your own sense of self. Without boundaries, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, taken for granted, or even resentful toward the people in your life. The first step in setting boundaries is understanding your own needs and limits. Many people struggle with this because they have never taken the time to reflect on what makes them feel comfortable and secure in their relationships. They may have grown up in environments where their needs were dismissed or overlooked, leading them to believe that prioritizing themselves is selfish. However, setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of self-respect. It acknowledges that you have the right to protect your time, energy, and emotions. Once you've identified your needs and limits, the next step is to communicate them clearly to others. This can feel intimidating, especially if you're not used to expressing your feelings or if you fear how others might react. However, it's important to remember that boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're about expressing your own preferences and expectations. For example, if you have a friend who constantly calls late at night and it disrupts your sleep, you can calmly let them know that you need to set a cutoff time for calls. Communicating your boundaries with honesty and clarity allows others to understand what you need from the relationship. It's also crucial to be consistent with your boundaries. Once you've set them, you need to follow through on enforcing them. Inconsistency can send mixed messages and make it harder for others to respect your limits. For instance, if you tell a coworker that you can't take on additional tasks because you're already overwhelmed, but then you agree to help when they push back, you're undermining your own boundary. Consistency shows others that you take your boundaries seriously and that you expect them to do the same. Another key aspect of setting boundaries is recognizing and accepting that not everyone will react positively. Some people may be surprised or even offended when you assert your limits, especially if they become accustomed to you always saying yes or going along with their requests. This is particularly true in relationships where the dynamic has been unbalanced for a long time. While it's natural to feel uncomfortable with their reactions, it's important to remember that their response is not your responsibility. Your primary obligation is to honor your own needs and values. Boundaries are also an essential tool for protecting yourself from toxic or manipulative behavior. In some cases, people may deliberately test or ignore your boundaries in an attempt to maintain control or get their way. This is why it's so important to be firm and unwavering in your stance. If someone repeatedly disrespects your boundaries despite your efforts to communicate them, it may be necessary to reevaluate the relationship. Walking away from situations or relationships that consistently violate your boundaries is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and self-respect. In addition to protecting your well-being, boundaries also enhance your relationships by fostering mutual respect and understanding. When you set clear boundaries, you're showing others that you value yourself and that you expect the same from them. This can inspire others to be more mindful of their actions and to communicate their own needs more openly. Healthy boundaries create a foundation of trust and respect that allows relationships to thrive. It's important to understand that setting boundaries is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that requires regular reflection and adjustment. As you grow and evolve, your needs and limits may change, and your boundaries should reflect those changes. Similarly, different relationships may require different boundaries depending on the dynamics and context. Being flexible and willing to adapt ensures that your boundaries remain effective and relevant. Prioritizing your values and principles over external approval is one of the most important steps toward living an authentic and fulfilling life. Your values and principles are the core of who you are. They guide your decisions, shape your character, and define the kind of person you aspire to be. When you prioritize them, you create a life that is grounded in integrity and meaning. However, it's not always easy to do this, especially in a world that often places a high value on conformity and external validation. The pressure to fit in or gain approval can sometimes lead us to compromise our values, leaving us feeling disconnected from ourselves and our true purpose. One of the first challenges in prioritizing your values is identifying what they truly are. Many people go through life without ever taking the time to reflect on what matters most to them. Instead, they adopt the values of those around them, family, friends, society, without questioning whether those values align with their own beliefs and aspirations. To live authentically, you must take the time to explore your inner self and determine what you stand for. Ask yourself questions like, what do I believe in? What kind of person do I want to be? What brings me a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose? The answers to these questions will help you uncover your core values. Once you've identified your values, the next step is to align your actions with them. This can be a daunting task, especially when external approval is at stake. For example, if honesty is one of your core values, you might find it challenging to speak the truth in situations where it could lead to conflict or disapproval. However, living in alignment with your values requires courage and a willingness to face discomfort. It means being true to yourself even when it's not the easiest or most convenient path. Over time, this alignment builds self-respect and confidence as you come to trust yourself to make choices that honor your principles. The desire for external approval is a powerful force that can often pull us away from our values. Humans are social creatures, and it's natural to want to be liked and accepted by others. However, when the need for approval becomes a driving force in your life, it can lead to a cycle of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice. You may find yourself saying yes to things you don't believe in or tolerating behaviors that go against your principles, all for the sake of maintaining harmony or earning praise. This can leave you feeling unfulfilled and even resentful as you realize you're living for others rather than for yourself. To break free from this cycle, it's important to shift your focus from seeking external validation to cultivating internal validation. This means valuing your own opinion of yourself more than the opinions of others. It involves recognizing that your worth is not determined by how many people approve of you, but by how well you live in alignment with your values. One way to strengthen your internal validation is by practicing self-reflection. Take time regularly to evaluate your actions and decisions, asking yourself whether they reflect the person you want to be. Celebrate the moments when you stay true to your values and learn from the times when you fall short. Another challenge in prioritizing your values is navigating the influence of societal expectations. Society often promotes a set of standards that may not align with your personal values, such as the pursuit of wealth, status, or perfection. It's easy to get caught up in these expectations and lose sight of what truly matters to you. To resist this influence, you must develop a strong sense of self-awareness and clarity about your own priorities. Remind yourself that you are not obligated to live according to anyone else's script. Your life is your own, and you have the right to define success and fulfillment on your own terms. Standing firm in your values also requires the ability to handle criticism and rejection. When you choose to prioritize your principles over external approval, not everyone will understand or agree with your choices. Some people may even try to pressure you into conforming to their expectations. This is why it's essential to build resilience and stay grounded in your sense of self. Surround yourself with people who support and respect your values, and let go of relationships that consistently undermine your authenticity. Remember that the people who truly care about you will value you for who you are, not for how well you fit their mold. Learning to say no without guilt or explanation is a powerful skill that can transform your life and relationships. It allows you to take control of your time, energy, and priorities, ensuring that you are not constantly overcommitting or sacrificing your well-being for the sake of others. For many people, saying no can feel difficult or uncomfortable, especially if they fear disappointing others or being perceived as unkind. However, understanding the importance of this skill and practicing it consistently can help you establish healthier boundaries and create a life that aligns with your values. The discomfort around saying no often stems from the fear of rejection or conflict. Many people worry that turning down a request will upset the other person or damage the relationship. This fear can lead to a pattern of agreeing to things out of obligation rather than genuine willingness. Over time, this pattern can result in feelings of resentment, stress, and burnout. To break free from this cycle, it's essential to recognize that saying no is not inherently rude or selfish. It's a necessary part of self-care and an expression of your right to make choices that are in your best interest. One of the keys to saying no effectively is to do so with clarity and confidence. When you hesitate or provide lengthy explanations, it can make your no seem negotiable, leaving room for the other person to push back or try to convince you otherwise. Instead, a simple and direct response, such as "I can't commit to that right now," or "I'm unable to help this time," communicates your decision clearly and leaves little room for misunderstanding. You don't need to justify your reasons or over-explain. Your decision is valid simply because it reflects your priorities and limits. Practicing assertiveness is another important aspect of learning to say no. Assertiveness involves expressing your thoughts and feelings honestly while respecting the rights and feelings of others. It's a balanced approach that allows you to stand up for yourself without being aggressive or dismissive. For example, if a colleague asks you to take on an extra project when you're already overwhelmed, you might say, "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I have too much on my plate right now to take on additional work." This response acknowledges their request while firmly stating your boundary. It's also helpful to remember that saying no is not the same as rejecting the person making the request. Often, people take on more than they can handle because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings or appear unkind. However, declining a request does not mean you are rejecting or devaluing the other person. It simply means that you are honoring your own needs and limitations. In fact, being honest about what you can and cannot do can lead to healthier and more respectful relationships, as it sets clear expectations and reduces the likelihood of misunderstandings. Another important strategy is to give yourself permission to pause before responding to a request. When someone asks for your help or involvement, it's natural to feel pressured to give an immediate answer. However, taking a moment to consider your options allows you to make a more thoughtful decision. You might say, "Let me think about that and get back to you," which gives you time to evaluate whether the request aligns with your priorities and whether you have the capacity to fulfill it. This pause also helps you avoid saying yes out of impulse or guilt. Learning to say no is not just about protecting your time and energy. It's also about creating space for the things that truly matter to you. When you say yes to every request, you risk spreading yourself too thin and neglecting your own goals and needs. By being selective about where you invest your time and effort, You can focus on the activities and relationships that bring you joy and fulfillment. This intentional approach to decision-making ensures that your yes carries more weight and meaning as it reflects a genuine desire to contribute rather than a sense of obligation. It's worth acknowledging that saying no can feel especially challenging in certain contexts, such as with close friends, family members, or authority figures. These relationships often carry added expectations and emotional dynamics that can make it harder to assert your boundaries. In these situations, it's important to remind yourself that your worth is not determined by your ability to meet everyone's expectations. You have the right to prioritize your well-being, even if it means disappointing someone else. Over time, as you practice saying no with confidence and consistency, it becomes easier to navigate these dynamics without compromising your values or sense of self. Identifying and addressing the fear of rejection or conflict is a crucial step in breaking free from the patterns of people-pleasing and overly accommodating behavior. Fear of rejection and conflict often stems from a deep-seated desire to belong and be accepted, which is a natural human inclination. However, when this fear begins to dominate your decisions and interactions, it can lead to a life where you prioritize the approval of others over your own needs, values, and well-being. Understanding the root causes of these fears and developing strategies to address them can empower you to navigate relationships and situations with greater confidence and authenticity. The fear of rejection often originates from early experiences such as criticism, neglect, or an overemphasis on perfection in childhood. If you were raised in an environment where your worth was tied to meeting certain expectations or gaining approval, you might have learned to equate rejection with a lack of value. This can lead to a heightened sensitivity to any situation that feels like disapproval or abandonment. Over time, this fear can manifest in behaviors like avoiding confrontation, saying yes when you want to say no, or altering your personality to fit the preferences of others. Similarly, the fear of conflict arises from the belief that disagreement or confrontation will lead to negative outcomes, such as damaged relationships or escalating hostility. This belief can make you hesitant to express your thoughts, feelings, or boundaries, even when doing so is necessary. The desire to maintain peace at all costs can cause you to suppress your own needs and opinions, creating an imbalance in your relationships. While avoiding conflict might seem like a way to preserve harmony, it often leads to unresolved issues and built-up resentment, which can ultimately harm the very relationships you're trying to protect. Addressing these fears begins with self-awareness. Take the time to reflect on how the fear of rejection or conflict influences your behavior. Pay attention to moments when you feel compelled to please others or avoid confrontation, and ask yourself what underlying beliefs or emotions are driving those actions. For example, you might realize that you're afraid of saying no to a friend because you believe they'll think less of you or stop liking you. By identifying these thoughts, you can begin to challenge their validity and replace them with healthier perspectives. One effective way to challenge these fears is to reframe rejection and conflict as opportunities for growth and understanding rather than as threats. Rejection, for instance, is not a reflection of your worth or value as a person. It simply means that your preferences, opinions, or boundaries do not align with someone else's at that particular moment. This misalignment does not diminish your inherent value or the validity of your needs. Similarly, conflict can be seen as a natural part of human interaction rather than something to be avoided at all costs. When approached constructively, conflict provides an opportunity to clarify misunderstandings, strengthen relationships, and advocate for yourself. Building your tolerance for rejection and conflict requires practice and patience. Start by setting small, manageable goals that push you slightly out of your comfort zone. For example, you might practice saying no to a minor request or expressing a differing opinion in a low-stakes conversation. These small actions help you build confidence in your ability to handle rejection or disagreement without compromising your self-worth. Over time, as you experience positive outcomes from these efforts, you'll begin to see that your fears are often exaggerated or unfounded. Another important aspect of addressing these fears is learning to separate your self-worth from external validation. Your value as a person is not determined by how many people like you, agree with you, or approve of your choices. It is rooted in your inherent dignity and the unique qualities you bring to the world. When you internalize this truth, it becomes easier to face rejection or conflict without feeling personally attacked or diminished. You recognize that other people's opinions are just that, opinions, and they do not define your worth or identity. Developing healthy communication skills is also essential for addressing the fear of conflict. Often, people avoid confrontation because they fear it will escalate into hostility or damage relationships. However, conflict does not have to be combative or destructive. By approaching disagreements with respect, empathy, and a focus on finding common ground, you can navigate difficult conversations more effectively. This involves listening actively, expressing your thoughts calmly, and being willing to compromise when appropriate. When you handle conflict constructively, it not only reduces your fear of it, but also strengthens your relationships by fostering mutual understanding and respect. Surrounding yourself with supportive and respectful people can make a significant difference in addressing these fears. When you're in relationships with individuals who value and respect your boundaries, it becomes easier to express yourself without fear of rejection or conflict. These relationships provide a safe space for you to practice assertiveness and build confidence in your ability to navigate challenging interactions. If certain relationships consistently trigger your fears or involve manipulation and disrespect, it may be necessary to reevaluate their place in your life. Embracing self-respect and cultivating a deeper appreciation for your own worth is an essential step toward breaking free from the cycle of prioritizing others at your own expense. Self-respect is the foundation upon which healthy relationships, personal fulfillment, and emotional resilience are built. It involves valuing yourself enough to honor your needs, stand by your boundaries, and make decisions that align with your principles. When you fully embrace self-respect, you no longer feel the need to constantly seek validation or approval from others, as you recognize that your worth is intrinsic and independent of external opinions. At its core, self-respect begins with self-awareness. Understanding who you are, your values, strengths, weaknesses, and desires forms the basis of respecting yourself. This requires an honest and compassionate examination of your inner world. Instead of focusing on perceived flaws or failures, shift your perspective to acknowledge your unique qualities and the progress you've made in life. Celebrate the experiences that have shaped you and the challenges you've overcome. This self-awareness not only helps you better understand your needs and boundaries, but also reinforces the belief that you are deserving of respect from both yourself and others. One of the key ways to practice self-respect is by prioritizing your well-being. This means taking care of your physical, emotional, and mental health, even when it feels inconvenient or when others demand your time and energy. Self-respect allows you to say no to things that drain you, whether it's a toxic relationship, an overwhelming workload, or activities that don't align with your values. It also encourages you to invest in self-care, whether that's through setting aside time for rest, pursuing hobbies that bring you joy, or seeking support when you need it. When you treat yourself with kindness and prioritize your needs, you send a powerful message to yourself and others that you are worthy of care and consideration. Another aspect of embracing self-respect is learning to set and maintain boundaries without guilt. Boundaries are an expression of self-respect because they define what you are willing to accept and what you are not. They protect your time, energy, and emotional health, ensuring that you don't overextend yourself or allow others to take advantage of you. Establishing boundaries can be challenging, especially if you're used to putting others first or fear conflict. However, each time you enforce a boundary, you reinforce your commitment to honoring yourself. This builds confidence and strengthens your ability to navigate relationships with clarity and intention. Self-respect also involves letting go of the need for constant external validation. Many people fall into the trap of seeking approval from others as a way to feel valued or accepted. While positive feedback and support from others can be affirming, relying on it as your primary source of self-worth is unsustainable and often leads to people-pleasing behaviors. To break this cycle, focus on cultivating internal validation by affirming your own achievements, decisions, and values. Practice recognizing your worth regardless of whether others acknowledge it. This internal shift empowers you to make choices that align with your authentic self rather than seeking approval at the expense of your happiness or integrity. A critical component of self-respect is taking responsibility for your actions and decisions. This means holding yourself accountable for your mistakes without resorting to harsh self-criticism. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, use these experiences as opportunities for growth and learning. Self-respect allows you to forgive yourself for past missteps while committing to do better in the future. By taking ownership of your journey, you build a sense of empowerment and resilience that strengthens your self-esteem. Another way to nurture self-respect is by surrounding yourself with people who uplift and inspire you. The company you keep has a profound impact on how you perceive yourself. When you associate with individuals who respect your boundaries, celebrate your successes, and encourage your growth, it becomes easier to maintain a strong sense of self-worth. Conversely, relationships that are characterized by manipulation, disrespect, or negativity can erode your self-esteem and make it harder to embrace self-respect. Be intentional about the relationships you nurture and don't hesitate to distance yourself from those that consistently undermine your well-being. Embracing self-respect also requires embracing your individuality. In a world that often emphasizes conformity, it can be tempting to downplay your uniqueness or try to fit into a mold that others expect of you. However, true self-respect comes from accepting and celebrating the qualities that make you who you are. This includes your passions, quirks, values, and aspirations. When you embrace your individuality, you free yourself from the pressure to constantly compare yourself to others or measure your worth by external standards. Instead, you focus on living a life that is true to yourself. Practicing self-respect is an ongoing journey rather than a one-time decision. It requires consistent effort, reflection, and commitment to honoring your worth. Each time you make a choice that aligns with self-respect, you reinforce the belief that you are deserving of a fulfilling and authentic life. Over time, this practice becomes a natural and integral part of who you are, empowering you to live with confidence, clarity, and purpose.